start the candidates forum with Dawn DiBlasi as our moderator.
Good evening, everybody. Again, thanks for being here. A couple of housekeeping things. We didn't have as much time as we would have liked, so we had cut a few questions out, and I'd like to go look at it. These questions weren't come up with lately. There's topics we've been discussing for quite some time. And on the first question is on healthcare. We will not be asking the last question. Please relate a constituent story you heard during this campaign season, although I think that's really important. I don't so we're probably not going to get to that one. So I've changed the order of the two above it. Round two. Let's go over the set with that one. Round three, the public transportation question. LD 1248 evidently has been tabled, so I'm going to tweak the question just a little bit so that it makes more sense. Round four, I will be not asking the last question, what avenues could be explored through the legislative process, because I think that's going to take more than a minute to answer. It's a big question. And then question 5, the first one, what is your vision of revitalizing our local workforce and boosting economic development? We're probably not going to get to that one as well. But what we are discussing is when this forum is over, we're going to have these sent out to you so that you can actually take the time to answer these questions in total. Tonight we're going to kind of move right along. I don't want to waste any more time, so without further ado, I'm going to begin. Does anyone have any questions before I start? Everybody has roughly 1 minute. Okay.
How will we start? What will be the order?
What will happen is I'm going to read you a little bit of background just so that the audience knows what I'm leading into, and then I'm going to ask the two questions, and I'm probably going to start at the end and work my way this way. I might mix it up next time and start at this end and move that way, so bear with me. And don't feel shy about asking me anything you need to ask me, if you need to excuse yourself.
And when we get the microphone, or do we just speak really loudly so the recorder can get our answers?
I think we're going to have to speak very loud, but unfortunately the microphone is attached to the recorder. I don't know if we'll get there. That's the participant will go all the way over. So they can see. It will. Okay.
Right, so then I should probably ask the question and get ready to pass. All right, the first question is on health care. As we all know, Medicaid expansion passed at the ballot box in November of 2017. It's caught up in the main legal system right now. When implemented, this will provide health care access to an additional 70,000 low-income Mainers. Medicaid expansion will open up health care access to adults who earn less than 138% of the federal poverty level, which is about $16,000 for one person and roughly $22,000 for a family of two. So according to recent news articles in the Pullman Press Herald, the LePage administration is rejecting applications for Medicaid from people who became newly eligible for the program as of July 2nd. We have concerns about this. So the first question, and I will go from right to left for this question, is do you believe health care is a moral imperative and a human right? And I can either ask you that or to follow up to it now, and having that to both this time, I think that would be better. Okay, so do you believe health care is a moral imperative and human right? I'll start with that, with Bellows.
So you could all work together?
I support you
universal single-payer health care. I think it's a federal issue that we need to solve nationally, and I do support Medicaid expansion. And I want to share with you, this morning I was on the phone with a gentleman who has health insurance. His wife was diagnosed with cancer last winter, and she was rushed from the hospital in Augusta to Portland. Several months later, as they were struggling with this diagnosis, they received a bill for the ambulance ride. And so we were trying to navigate with insurance companies and with the insurance company, with healthcare advocates, what he could do. And it turned out that, unfortunately, the ambulance company should have filed a claim with his insurance company, but they didn't. So now he's probably on the hook. This is just one example of how our healthcare system is utterly and completely broken. People with health insurance have huge deductibles, skyrocketing premiums, and it's just not working. Thank you.
Okay, microphone for just a minute. You answered the question, but the second part was, do you support Medicaid expansion?
I told you, yeah, I did.
Very much.
And I did it in 1 minute and some purpose. You did that again.
If you need me to repeat the question, feel free.
Right, I have the questions right in front of me. And again, I'm Karen Kusiak. I also would definitely support Medicaid expansion. In fact, I did. I voted for it when I was representing Fairfield several years ago. I would like to see a single-payer system from the federal level that would cover all Americans. In the meantime, I've been moved by the work of, I think it's Maine All Care, and I was talking with some folks in that organization this weekend about their attempts to educate Mainers about the benefits of a single-payer plan here operating at the state level. And there are just many benefits to it. As far as a story about a constituent, at doors so much, I haven't heard about Medicaid expansion. Some people who know or are in the medical field will say, yes, we need to definitely expand that. I'm glad you stand for that. It will assist with positions and jobs. But I also hear about the high cost of programs for people who are covered and the high cost of their medications and problems with them.
Jan Collins. I do support Medicaid expansion, and I also support universal single-payer health care. I believe that health care is a moral and human right, that health care should not be dependent on how much money you make, that we all deserve health care. 50% of all bankruptcies occur as a result of a medical issue. People should not have to lose their homes in order to get good health care. I have many, many stories I could tell about healthcare needs, especially for those who are elderly or on fixed incomes. It might take me too long to do that. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Actually, the question is cut out.
I'm Lindsay Harwoff. Yes, I believe that we should expand Medicaid. Not only is that my personal belief, but we've already voted on it. So I feel like it's our duty to do what the people have already said that they want to do, and that's what we're here for. So even if I didn't agree with that, it's still something that should be done because that's what the people have voted on. I do believe that healthcare is a moral imperative and a human right. My husband does lots of humanitarian work. We have experience traveling after natural disasters all over the world, and we've lived in Japan. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from other cultures who also have an aging population and how they treat their citizens.
Thanks, Lindsay. Ken Ackley from Monmouth. And I do support Medicaid expansion and also recognize that access to health care is a human right. And I think I look at our current system and the inefficiencies that are part of our current system. The law already says that when someone shows up to the emergency room, they get care. they get a standard of care that is the minimum acceptable from the American Medical Association. It doesn't matter. So this is really a settled issue. It's already recognized as a right, and really what we need to be focusing on is what is the most efficient way of delivering that. Because 70,000 Mainers using the emergency room as a primary care source is not an affordable health care.
Thank you. I also agree that health insurance should be a right, not a privilege for just the wealthy. I voted for Medicaid expansion at least 5, I think it was 5 times, maybe 6, but I think it was 5. And quickly, in case any of you didn't see my column in the Kennebec Journal or the Portland Press Herald, I live every day. I have a son who's almost 40 who is very, very sick with Crohn's disease. He has no insurance. He is fighting right now to keep his SSI that was taken away 2 months after our new president came into term. So we fought that, and he is coming for insurance. But every 6 weeks he goes for an infusion that's $1,800. His Social Security benefits at $1,200. And I can tell you, personal experience, that you get treated totally different if you're not insured, if you have health insurance. And as a 2-time cancer survivor, it's very expensive. So I am in favor of Medicaid expansion, and insurance should be a right for everyone in this country, not a privilege like it is in every other industrial country. Thank you.
Short answer is yes and yes. One of the points that I make to people when I'm out in the field is that what we have now is not health insurance, it's a reverse lottery ticket you hope you don't have to cash. And personally, if I had a boss who gave me a directive at work and I didn't follow that directive, I ought to be fired. Message to the legislature and the government.
I think that healthcare is absolutely a moral imperative and a human right, and our current approach of healthcare for the lucky is at best amoral, bordering on totally immoral. Furthermore, it is an economic imperative. Keeping people sick or saddling them with crushing medical debts is bad for our economy, and it doesn't matter what your ideology with respect to healthcare as a human right is. We can all agree that we shouldn't be crushing our economy with medical debts. I have a constituent who got cancer just out of high school, and even though he's now completely employed, he will likely never be able to own a home because of his medical debts. I think that is indicative of what's happening in our society.
Thank you. Colleen Madigan. Yes, absolutely support Medicaid expansion. I've voted for it a number of times. And yes, I believe healthcare is a moral and human right. There's no excuse for this country for people to not have access to healthcare. I explain all the time that Medicaid expansion primarily helps working people because it helps people who are up to 138% of the poverty level, which primarily is people working, not getting enough hours or working for a minimum wage. And I just want to mention a couple things. One is I have a friend who, rationing insulin. We had a man who made pizza, a local pizza place, who had very brittle type 1 diabetes, a son of a friend of mine who I knit with. And he died a year and a half ago because he was trying to ration his insulin, which is just ridiculous for a man who probably made your pizza. And he's no longer with us. I also spoke to a man over the weekend. His wife has a chronic health condition. She's 61 years old. She doesn't qualify for Medicare. They're paying $900 a month because she can't go without oxygen. So they're going without other things. And this is someone, a family in Waterville. And there's no excuse for that in America.
Yes, I'm in favor of Medicaid expansion, not only for the bill that was passed and that the public has approved, but there's also aspects of transportation that could be covered under Medicaid that aren't in the state of Maine. And when you're talking about a state of Maine that doesn't have a huge tax base, the population is much more elderly than most other states in the country. I think that you've really got to maximize the dollar by making Medicaid expansion, by approving it as much as you can. And I believe that coverage for healthcare is a human right, and I believe it's one of those functions that government should undertake. And I also believe in a single payer system. I'm 69 years old. I have Medicare. That works fine, and the administrators of the program don't make $7 and $8 million a year. And I think we should. That's the route we should take.
All right, round two. I'm going to start from left to right this time. Okay? Round two is a question about racism and immigration. And Maine and the country is made up of people from all walks of life, all religions, many different cultures. There are 30 different countries to Maine that have come to Maine to live in recent years. And so we are faced every day with issues of racism and immigration and people migrating here for a better life. And so the questions begin. What is your personal commitment to assisting new Mainers to feel welcome, know that they have a place at the table, and that they're welcome within our communities? I'll start with that, and I'd like to follow it up with, would you co-sponsor a resolution? So I'm going to let you answer the first question, and I'm going to have you answer the second before we pass the mic.
I would take part in our social organizations, our churches, our social institutions, to make sure that we are welcoming to those people who have been raised and lived outside of our culture, so that they can feel comfortable here and get the advantages of our culture.
I'll speak up. While you still have the mic. The second part of the question is, would you co-sponsor a resolution asking the 129th legislature to make note of these additional major holidays, as well as raise awareness within the district schools? So at the back of your packet, there's a list that shows major religious holidays. And some of them are recognized now, and some of them are not recognized. So I guess the question is going to boil down to, do you support respecting holidays of other cultures?
Yes, I support the equality of different cultures and different religions, and that they should be treated the same.
Okay, the first part of the question is my personal commitment to making new Mainers feel welcome. I do support new Mainers. The fact of the matter is, we have a very, homogeneous state that we need new people. I mean, when you look at workforce development issues, we need new people to come and work here. We need to encourage new Mainers. I will say that in the central Maine area, as part of my clinical work as a social worker in this county, that I'm aware that the largest immigrant population group in central Maine is primarily Iraqi refugees, and I've worked with a number of them. And they're here because their country has been at war with ours. And they're here to make a better life, and I absolutely support them doing that. As far as raising awareness in school holidays, I used to work in schools. I think that's a great opportunity for people to learn, for students and teachers to learn about different cultures, different religions, different faiths, and if they want to recognize them in some way, it would be great if schools did that.
I think the answer to these two questions really ties together in that we need to move beyond the idea that we are going to tolerate other cultures and other people, and we need to start to celebrate other cultures and other people, because ultimately they're not other cultures. They're here, they're part of our culture. And I think that the educational opportunity for students to learn about those cultures in our schools is very important. Despite what the President said today at the UN, our nation and state cannot withdraw from the world. And as we make our state and our students more aware of the cultures that live and work here, we are also preparing them to interact positively with the wider world. And that's going to bring us more prosperity and more understanding and hopefully ultimately more peace. And I think that is a very important thing, and we should definitely support these efforts.
I make the point with the people when they're willing to listen that I think immigrants in Maine are going to be our salvation of a workforce that's rapidly expiring. I think they're also one of the hopes we have for the farms that are being abandoned. We have a daughter who teaches 5th grade math in the Bronx. They celebrate all of these holidays. She thinks it's great because she gets extra days off. I don't have any problem whatsoever supporting awareness and encouragement of all of these holidays.
I would just open with, I know that we have a new maintenance group in Augusta. I participated with them and tried to help when I can. I remember specifically, I'm sure everyone will remember, it's either a year or two or maybe longer because time flies by. We were all out on the bridge holding candles in support of them. And as far as co-sponsoring a resolution to support them, I would certainly be willing to do that. And I just think it's important for people to remember that we were all immigrants once.
So I'm not only the son of Monmouth, I'm the son of an immigrant. And immigration has been a national and even state tradition since the beginning. And so there's two parts to this. There's an ethical part which says to me that we ought to be honoring and celebrating that tradition as a country and as a state. But there's also the economic part, which is we need young people. We need to be attractive to young people. We need to be finding young people anywhere we can and asking them and proving to them that Maine is a good place to live and to raise a family. And part of that is welcoming people who are different. And so, yeah, I would be in support of raising awareness of other cultures and religious holidays.
My family's from away, as are many people that live in Maine, and we used to live in Des Moines, and my family did a lot of work with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So we've done a lot of work with refugees, and what I've learned from being in that state is your community can very much benefit from diversity, from refugees, not only bringing in a younger population, which is definitely needed. We need people from away. As much as sometimes you hear that you don't like people from away, we need people from away to come in and boost the economy. Also, it gives small business owners, like myself, we run a small farm. It gives you a different look at what you can do with your own business to support a different culture. You know, they do things differently in farming. That gives you another way to run your business to help them. So it's good for them, it's good for you. So I'm all for it, and definitely for teaching these things in schools, just like everything else.
Jan Collins. I have personal experience with refugees. A few years back, I was approached by a friend about taking a Pakistani exchange student through the youth exchange program with the U.S. State Department. And the idea behind this was to build bridges with Muslim countries instead of fighting wars. That led to our family exchanging with their family. Her parents came to Maine and we went to Pakistan. And then she's been here several times. But in that process, we also met some Afghan refugees who were great friends. And was also another bridge because the Pakistani family that I had was Sunni and the Afghans were Shia. And that is also an area of contention if you know anything about those two groups. And they built such a strong relationship that they feel like sisters now. I also heard Dana Connors, the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, saying it was absolutely necessary that we have immigrants in the state of Maine for the expansion of our economy. As you've probably seen, the predictions are that there will be 96 jobs added in 10 years, and the only way to combat that is with new people.
Great, thanks for this question. I support the resolution that the Augusta School Board passed not too long ago. I didn't read all the details, but it indeed will honor the holidays that are outlined here. For years I've had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on my syllabi, and it doesn't mean that we take the day off. It means that students who are observing those holidays will not be penalized for missing class or not sending in an assignment. And I'd extend it to secondary schools. They won't be penalized if they can't compete in their varsity sport on those days. So adding new holidays to that list I think is great. I'm a family team member for the Waterville Area New Mayors Project. We're a part of Capital Area New Mayors Project. I've supported a local family, many of you know that. I spent last New Year's Eve at the Augusta Capital Area New Mayors Project potluck dinner and dance. I had a summer dinner. I was invited to an Iraqi family's summer dinner, and I attended that. I'm on the steering committee for Hope House English Language Program in Portland, and I occasionally substitute teach. This is a volunteer-run organization where English classes are offered most mornings of the week to members of the New Maynard community in Portland. I supported and testified in favor of Republican Senator Roger Cates' LD 1492, which would have funded welcome centers. So I think my time is up. Go on.
Thank you. So when I was 15, I was an exchange student to Brazil, and it was life-changing. I went on to study abroad in college. I was in the Peace Corps in Panama, and my career has really been centered in civil rights and human rights, first as executive director at the ACLU, and now currently as executive director of the Holocaust and Human Rights Center. And the mission of the Holocaust and Human Rights Center is to promote universal respect for human rights, using the lessons of the Holocaust and other human rights events around the world. We hope to encourage and inspire people to reflect and act to confront prejudice, intolerance, and discrimination when it occurs. And so I think that's extraordinarily important. It's what I do in my work, and it's how I try to act in the legislature, is to support diversity and inclusion and respect, universal respect for human rights. And I'm so proud that Temple Bethel and Augusta has taken a leadership role in helping to make sure that schools are respectful and inclusive of religious holidays. Thank you.
Okay, on to round 3. Again, I'll start where I finished. Public transportation is the topic. Public transportation is essential for those who cannot drive. We have a lot of elderly people. We have children that need to get to places. Do you support or oppose funding for a bill that would have the elements contained in the form of LD 1248? And if so, will you commit to revisiting the proposed bill in the next legislative session. That's kind of a long one, so I'm going to repeat it. Do you support or oppose funding for a bill that would have the elements contained in the former LD 1248? And if so, will you commit to revisiting the proposed bill in the next legislative session?
Absolutely, I supported this one. This past weekend, I met a senior citizen, a woman in her 80s, and she shared with me that she'd given up her license to drive. And she lives on a rural road in my district, and she said, it is so hard. She said, I can't get my groceries all the time. It's hard to find help to get to my appointments. She said, it turns out I have too much money to be able to get some of the free transportation that exists, but I'm barely making ends meet. So I think we absolutely need to invest in public transportation, particularly given our aging population. And I think, unfortunately, one of the great disasters of this administration is the evisceration of a system that was working really well in rural areas so that the state contracted out with an out-of-state company and spent a ton of money for a system that isn't working for people right now.
Thank you. Without knowing the details of LD 1214, and I just saw this text moments ago when I flipped the page, I can commit to revisiting it. And I'd like to hear what the arguments are in favor of it, because I do know that transportation for folks, older folks, and folks who don't drive or don't have access to cars in Maine, and even single parents who don't have access to reliable transportation, younger folks, is a big challenge for folks in Maine. So I absolutely support that. I know we have the KV Explorer locally that makes trips for folks, and I fully expect that their routes and their service could be expanded and used. When I was thinking about this question, what we got were the topics. The topic item was transportation. I immediately started thinking about longer distance transportation, particularly restoring passenger rail to Augusta, Waterville, and Bangor, and I spoke with some folks this weekend about the viability of that. We have people living close to these transportation hubs. It will cut down on the need to use cars to get people long distances, either possibly get to the hospital in Boston or in Portland at less expense and wear and tear on the roads.
Jan Collins. I'm looking at LD 1248 in the synopsis here, and it is for only seniors and developed, I think it's supposed to be developmentally disabled individuals, and I would like to see that expanded. I know of several people who have had bad experiences with the current system. As Shenna was mentioning, they've got a ride to an appointment, and nobody shows up to bring them home. They wait for hours, sometimes with children at police stations. It's not a good scene. The other thing is that rural Maine is probably more affected by this than any other place because the distances are so far between places, including doctor's appointments, and going to a grocery store can be an hour away. And I have seen people who could not go out to get groceries because they didn't have a means of transporting somebody with a disability. So certainly I would support this and commit to expanding it. Thank you.
I don't know all of the specifics of LD 1248, but it sounds like a very good idea. It reminded me when my husband and I worked in Japan, we were pregnant with our first child, and I spent the very first, over half of the pregnancy there, and so I got to experience what it was like in their healthcare system and how they treat pregnancy and pregnant women. And one of the benefits was that any pregnant woman, the town would give you these taxi vouchers. And anytime you had to go to the doctor, you would just give them your voucher and they'd make sure that you could get to your appointments. And that always stuck with me especially because it was my first experience, how I was treated there. And it shouldn't be difficult, no matter where you live, if you're pregnant, if you're elderly, if you're disabled, to get at least to a doctor's visit. I think that cuts down on a lot of other problems if we can just take care of those kinds of things. So I fully support this idea.
We're an aging state, and the most cost-effective location for care for our aging population is in their own homes. Transportation is a key element to making that happen. And so I supported LD 1248, and I would again.
Thank you. I did support LD 1248, and I will support it again. We're very fortunate in the cities to have like a KVCAP or another transportation system. I agree with one of the Senate candidates at the other end that if we could expand our railways to come up to Augusta and Lewiston and maybe up onto Bangor, people could take long trips on that. But I think we need to revisit some kind of ride sharing offer or not offer. We need to revisit the business that was given to a Connecticut firm that's not doing what it should be doing, and maybe like a healthcare Uber or something that can get our people where they need to go and not have them worry about whether or not they're going to have the ride home.
I'm going to start by playing devil's advocate and say that one of the things that concerns me is at some point there won't be enough money to take care of everything that we want to do. So that's a thought that's in the back of my mind. Having said that, and living in a town where there's a lot of people, the nearest grocery store of any size is 6 miles away. The bank is going from town. The gas station is 5 miles in another town. Transportation is critical. Not just for senior citizens, but it's also for people that want to work. Backyard Farms in Madison has been trying to expand for several years now. One of the deal breakers is they can't get enough people who can get there to go to work. If we had shuttle buses from towns like Heartland to go to a place like that, it would be a win-win for both. I also think that anything that goes along with transportation really and truly should be piggybacked with high-speed internet, because then you can do things like home health care, and you can also decrease people's social isolation. So I'm a huge proponent of better cell phone service and high-speed internet statewide.
I would certainly support revisiting LD 1248. But much like many good proposals, I would like to see if we can make it better. One thing I think is missing from this is a public transportation option for people who are going to and from work. And that's not only important at a fundamental fairness level, but it's also important because that's how we're going to pay for public transportation. Fares, and ultimately giving people the economic opportunity to increase the revenue to pay for our programs, which they can do if they can get to work. So I think that we need to look at public transportation both in terms of being a service and also in terms of being something that can ultimately generate revenue if we make it available to working people.
Thank you, Colleen Madigan. I remember 1248. Certainly, people in rural areas who are elderly or have a disability, getting to their appointments is important, particularly when they're not on Medicaid, when they only have Medicare. And that's kind of what that bill addressed. So I absolutely support revisiting that. I would also support, back when I was in Senate, I put in a bill to fix the main care transportation problem, because I think contracting it out in a way is not something, the way it's currently done is not something we have to do in that manner. There was another model that actually would be more effective. The other thing I will say is that we need to address rural transportation as a whole, because you can't the best way for people to not be poor anymore is for them to go to work. And that's certainly a requirement. There's work requirements now for things like food stamps, and, TANF and things like that. The biggest barrier for folks getting off those programs is having a reliable way to get to work, even in bad weather, even when they have car trouble. And so addressing this, the issue of backyard farms is a huge one, things like that. So we need to address this if we want to address the needs of our population, both elderly and poor.
Yes, I would support funding LD 1248. Also, we're an elderly state, we're a poor state. We don't have a tax base compared to other states. And right here where it says Maine spends only 40 cents per capita on public transportation compared to a national average of $45. I'm willing to bet that in there is Medicaid money that other states use as seed money to attract federal dollars. And we could do that if we weren't acting so foolishly. And I think it's time that we started doing that. And stop being penny wise and pound foolish.
Okay, round 4. In Maine, 183,310 people are struggling with hunger, and of them, 50,520 are children. 1 in 7 people struggles with hunger. 1 in 5 children struggle with hunger. In Kennebec County, the food insecurity rate is 14%. Estimated number per individual is 16,970 out of 120,953. In Somerset County, the food insecurity rate is 15.6%. Estimated number per individual is 8,030 out of 51,363 individuals. Food insecurity in Maine is 25% worse than the national average, and is worse now than it was during the height of the Great Recession. So the question is, can you give me one concrete step you will take when you are elected to solve food insecurity in Maine? I'm going to start at this end.
The first thing I would do is I would set up a committee, and I would have representatives from the churches, from the public school systems, from the private school systems, legislators, insurance companies, and employers. And I would get a handle on how many children actually wake up on a daily basis and are unable to get the food that they need for that day. And because I think we lack a consolidated planning plan to get us through. And, we're not going to be able to really address any subject until we start with a plan which addresses this, which, where people can research and find out what the truth is and stop using anecdotal information.
All right, I'm going to run off with 3 things. I think we should make food stamps be able to make people who receive food stamps be able to buy community and support agriculture shares. Look at people out of the house and supporting our local farmers. I think that would be a great thing. I think expanding kind of where WIC is used. WIC is for the women and children thing. If that can be used at farmers markets frequently now, like food stamps are able to. The other thing I would say is we need to secure and increase funding for Meals on Wheels, because one of the most effective ways to prevent rehospitalization in elderly people is keep them food secure and have, make sure that they're getting something, a nutritious meal a day. That's actually a really, and you get big bang for your buck because it's very volunteer driven. And I also was just reading today about an excellent program volunteer-driven, where people cook meals for elderly neighbors. That's something I was just thinking, this is something I may want to do to figure out how to do this in Waterville, because that seems like a great idea, because I often run into folks who are food insecure. Sometimes they bring them over a jar of my dad's homemade tomato sauce when that happens. But I think it's a really important thing that we could be doing more about. So there's a few ideas.
I definitely think that we need to focus on stopping the slide from one generation into the next with regard to food insecurity. If 1 in 7 people are struggling, but 1 in 5 children are, that means our children are less food secure than we are. And that has to stop. We need to stop trying to punish children for the perceived moral failings of their parents. Whether a child's parents are able or willing to work, or whatever their personal struggles are in life, we need to make sure that children are able to get the food they need. As president of the Kiwanis Club of Greater Waterville, I've worked to set up a backpack program for Benton, Winslow, and Waterville schools. And the one thing I've run into in that has amazed me is people don't know these statistics. And people really don't understand that 40 packets of food for a week at each of those schools scratches the surface of the need that we're seeing. And I think we need to have more education, because I don't think anybody in the general public really wants children to be food insecure. I think a lot of people don't know it's happening, and we need to do a better job of making sure they know.
It's a lot cheaper to screw something up than it is to fix it. And that's one of the reasons that we're having this and other problems. One of the things that occurred to me when I looked at this is every town has tillable land that's not being touched. It would be, I think, a good start to have each town encouraged, and maybe get a little seed money to start, to take a look at where is that land in the town, and see how much of it people would be willing to offer or allow to be used for community gardens. Community gardens are all well and good, but there's a second part that goes to it. People need to be educated on how to use those garden plots, because if they're not, half of them will give up in frustration. But I think that's at least one common sense way of addressing the problem.
Well, this is interesting. I don't think that I've ever really seen the fact that tells me that there's a 14% rate of food insecurity in Kennebec County, and that's pretty horrible. I think that we need to teach our people that are able to farm. I remember when I first moved into the city, I was only 12 miles out, but when I first came into Augusta, there were little parcels of land that you could rent and, grow some of your own food. And I know from participating in our food bank in Augusta that we raise money for many backpacks that get sent home with children, and it's really sad that we have to do this. So I think schools is a good place for our teachers to get back to community leaders and let them know how many young students don't have food insecurity, because if the students don't, there's a very good chance that the parents don't as well. And we need to teach people to farm and do better at fixing this, and I don't think that we have.
I look at the food insecurity situation with the most concern, for food insecurity with means kids. That, in my view, is a ticking time bomb, because we have seen time and again research that suggests acute childhood experiences such as food insecurity simply result in additional social costs when kids grow up and become adults. And so my priority would be to focus our efforts, our primary efforts, on solving the problem with kids. And you do that, I believe, through the school system, through creating a program where we are, through the Department of Agriculture, matching local resources through incentives. I a local farmer spoke to me about a Department of Agriculture program for the elderly, and it seems to me that our state agriculture program could spend some time looking at resources devoted specifically for kids.
My husband and I have a little bit of experience working in schools overseas, and something that always struck me was that schools we worked in, the kids have much more of a hand in taking care of the building, of preparing food and things like that. I think there's a huge missed opportunity in schools. 3 of our 4 kids are in elementary school now, and there's a huge missed opportunity in school gardens. I walk past our school garden every day when I take my preschooler in, and there's all this land, and no one's working it. There's a garden, someone planted it, it's not really doing well, no one's tending it. And it's a missed opportunity to reconnect children with where the food comes from. And it's one of the reasons why we went and started our own farm. We raise our own meat, we raise our own vegetables. I do my slaughtering. And there's a connection of knowing where the food comes from, and something we're very passionate about. And I think that should be taught in schools. I think the kids should have their hands in the dirt and know where the food comes from, and then be able to take it home. Make those gardens bigger. I think there's also an opportunity to reach out to families who are very destitute and look at where they live. Do they live in an apartment? Do they live in a small home? What land do they have? How can you teach them to farm with whatever it is that they have, whether it be a pot garden or, small pot outside? There's missed opportunities.
Did you say pot garden?
You grow them in that pot. Container garden.
Hi, Jan Collins, I'm a blueberry farmer. So this is an issue every August for us because we have excess produce. And I'm sure there are lots of farmers who are in the same category. It would be great to have a network to find some way to gather all that excess food. I work with local economic ministries to get volunteers in to pick blueberries and then take them to their food pantries. But I think it needs to be on a much larger scale. I think, however, the most important factor in food insecurity is income. And that means that there are many families that just are not making enough money to make ends meet. I think increasing the minimum wage has been a great start in that direction, but we also need to invest in those communities that have a surplus of workers and a deficit of work. So the state needs to make those kinds of commitments to those communities so they no longer have to be on programs that are demeaning.
Thank you. It's Karen Kusiak. Thank you, Representative Madigan, for your idea about being able to use food stamp benefits for CSA's community-supported agriculture. That makes great sense to me. I wouldn't have thought of that, and I'm with you. Let's introduce that bill. And thank you, Representative Ackley, for your reinforcement of the idea that we really should be focusing on children. Because one of the thoughts I had in relationship to thinking about this question was making sure that schools are using all of the opportunities that they have to provide what's called feeding programs. So school lunch programs have federal support to offer summer food for summer feeding programs. Again, that's what they're called. Out in the community at recreational sites, or children can come into the school district. So I certainly want to encourage school districts and school nutrition programs to support those summer programs, vacation programs, and also the breakfast programs and the snack programs that are available. After that, I just want to assure folks that the government assistance programs are very well run, very stringent. People, if they qualify for benefits, they eventually have to re-qualify. It's not, that they're always going to be receiving these services. I think my time is up.
I think a lot of the good ideas have already been said. So when I was in the legislature, I worked with a bipartisan coalition of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats on issues of childhood hunger. And specifically, there's a coalition called the Full Plates, Full Potential Coalition that's been doing a lot of policy work in this area and looking at expanding access to school breakfast. We were able to work on legislation to do that. Facilitating modernizing the school lunch program, and I co-sponsored a bill with Senator Joyce Maker, Republican from Washington County, one to prohibit schools from using denial of school lunches as punishment for kids. And I had another bill that passed, but we need to take it to the next level, to try to create a statewide technology, online technology for signing up for the school lunch program, so that parents could do it at home, kids could do it at home. Kids who are moving from district to district because of transient family situations would stay enrolled. Their information would follow them. I think improving access to some of the programs that we have and supporting those, because, as Representative Ackley said, if children don't have food, they can't learn, and it has significant long-term consequences for our society. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Round 5, workforce development questions. Immigrant-owned businesses generated $60.8 million in business income in 2014. Medicaid expansion will create roughly 6,000 new jobs, possibly higher wages than minimum wage. Despite historically low unemployment levels, Maine's economy is still a major issue in the 2018 campaigns. That's because Maine's aging population, losses in traditional manufacturing industries, stagnant wages, and the lure of better paying jobs in other states continue to combine to create a workforce shortage for the foreseeable future. The question becomes, what concrete steps would be among your priorities for the next legislative session, and would you support college loan forgiveness programs as a means of encouraging students to stay in Maine after graduation? This is an area where I agree with Governor LePage and some of the Senate Democratic leadership, Senator Nate Libby, for example. I support a statewide bond program. I think the state should engage in student loan forgiveness and also potentially more fairer student lending programs. Additionally, I serve on the Labor, Commerce, Research, and Economic Development Committee in the legislature, and so workforce is something that we focus on a lot. And one of the issues I think that we need to address is recruiting more young people and businesses to come to our state. And specifically, I think a key to that is broadband infrastructure. I meet people all the time that have moved to Maine for the way of life, the quality of our schools, the quality of the environment, who are commuting to companies that might be in other states, or they're working at home, whether it's software development. I know a woman who works in a publishing house. So I think if we were to improve our infrastructure to make high-speed, reliable internet access available in communities all across the state, we could more easily recruit both young people and businesses to grow Maine's economy and to also address our workforce shortages.
Thank you. I certainly support a college loan program for graduates who choose to stay in Maine and work in Maine. My recommendation is to keep it simple. I've tried to help one of my daughters navigate a system. She's teaching in an area where supposedly she's supposed to get loan forgiveness, and it's really hard to get all of the details lined up in the school district to verify that indeed she's in a shortage area. So keep it simple. I support, as far as workforce development, I support fully funding the education formula, including supporting community career technical education, the community college system, and the University of Maine system, the publicly supported higher education institutions in Maine need our support, and they're key for preparing adults for careers. Thank you for bringing up the broadband. That was on my radar too, for economic development, as well as cell phones, cell service throughout the state, and as I alluded to earlier, I supported 1492, and it would have provided training for new Mainers who need to transfer to gain the skills in order to work in fields that are in high demand here in Maine.
I don't know if I can talk fast enough to answer all the questions here. So one of the things that are an issue in rural areas is the inability to imagine jobs or professions that we've never seen. So we need to address rural aspirations. We need to open up the world to people who live in rural areas. Certainly, internet would be a great step forward. We have, in my district, there are huge areas that are without any internet service and no cellular service as well. One of the things that have affected us greatly is the elimination of industrial arts in middle school. That was a bad direction for education. There is a group called Sparks who is working on developing a connection between education, people who have businesses, people who are industry, and figuring out how we can best help out those people who work in those kinds of areas that are focused on industrial arts and are well needed in all areas of the state. So, I can see what time is up. Here we go.
This is a very, so many ways you could go with this answer. Something that I feel like we should get back to is looking forward. And like you were saying, Jim, that it's hard to imagine things you've never seen before, but we're going to have to do that. We almost had solar. I really wish that we could go back to that. I feel like that's a way we need to go. Solar and wind and bringing in new businesses, using the terrain and the assets that we have in Maine in a new way to bring in new jobs, bring in people from out of state and keep young people here with different kinds of jobs that we've never seen before. As for student loan forgiveness, it's like a whole big thing. I don't think that it should take you 20 plus years to pay off your college education in the first place, and considering I'm still paying off mine, it would be great to have loan forgiveness. So I'd like to see some specifics on that and how that would work, but that's a huge topic.
So David started us off today with a mention of concern over using the right phrase, social capital. And as soon as he said that, I said, oh, you know what? He's not talking about social capital. I think he's talking about human capital. And that's really what workforce development is about, is how do we go about developing human capital to help people be self-reliant and then help employers get things done. And we need to take a step back at the Department of Labor. We need to take a step back and think about what are some of the things that we can do as a state to make our system more flexible, because things are changing. You know, when I was a kid, I had no idea what a web designer might be, right? That wasn't even in my terminology. And so we don't know what's coming. When people become adults in our state, they may not understand exactly what skills are necessary. And so there's this whole credentialing process, this licensing process that's happening currently happening at the Department of Labor here in the state of Maine. And we need to take another look at exactly what we might be able to do there.
I also serve on the ALCRED committee with Senator Bellows, and some of the things that we've talked about, and I'll reiterate, is the need for broadband expansion. We talked about forgiveness of student college loans if they stay in the state for a number of years. I know in Augusta, our technical schools did have programs where they would actually, when a child came out of high school, they would have a skill so they could go to work if they didn't want to go on to a college. And so I think that we really need to push the 5 years. If you come here in Maine and you go to college, if you stay here 5 years, we'll help you with your debts And I think that we really need to stress the vocational colleges because I think we need those skills. Thank you.
I'm going to take that a step further. I would strongly support a $5 or $10 million bond issue the towns could draw on, and they could fund the cost of a tradesperson in their town getting an education in return for a commitment to work in that town for 10 years. Because I'll tell you folks, in the rural areas, we're going to be out of plumbers, electricians, oil burner people, and carpenters pretty darn fast, and they're not manufacturing out there with 3D printers.
So I have a lot of friends who have chosen to work outside of Maine, and I think my cohort has been particularly susceptible to getting an education either here or away, and then going away and staying away. And for me, choosing to come back was a really big step that most of my friends were not willing to take. And when I asked them why, the reason is because we don't have the jobs here that they want to do. Those jobs are high-tech manufacturing, they're in clean energy, they're in coding, they're in a number of industries that we don't have in great abundance now, but we certainly could. Another issue, and I think that getting those industries here with the correct incentives and the correct policies would go a long way to bringing people here. I would support loan forgiveness as a means of building up our workforce. I would also say we have a lot of people who were displaced by the recession, who are not young people, that are still not ready to retire, either because they don't have the means or they're not at the age where they feel that they've run out of things to do in society. And I think that it's very important that we look at these new industries as a way of attracting people back into the workforce as well.
Thank you, Colin Madigan. I think Maycare expansion brings thousands of jobs here, and those are usually good-paying jobs. It's not just CNAs, it's things like radiation techs, respiratory technicians, things like that. Broadband is a huge thing that can bring economic development. People will be able to work from their homes, or people will be able to start their own small business. The other thing I think is incentives, both education-wise, whether that's grants, specialized student loan forgiveness for folks in high-demand fields who are either displaced workers who used to work in manufacturing, or TANF recipients. We have a nice program, Parents as Scholars program, or new Mainers. The fact of the matter is we need more workers. I absolutely support the state doing something with student loan forgiveness because we're kind of a lower wage state than some of the closer states. People need to be able to make enough money to stay here. And the cost of college is prohibitive for many people. So they take a job out of state because they need to make a higher income. So I absolutely support that. Please.
Along with loan forgiveness, I would also like to see a program implemented where Maine residents who are enrolled in a degree granting program in either the community college or the University of Maine system be able to go tuition free.
All right, thank you all very much. Fantastic. Everybody had some really good answers. I can't tell you how thankful we are that you came here tonight. And I'm going to pass the mic on now to Helen. She's on her way up. Some of these topics were very near and dear to my heart. I'm a granddaughter of Italian immigrants. I'm in the loan forgiveness program right now, otherwise I'll be 72 when my student loan is paid. So I was very interested in your ideas and the thoughts that you had. Yes, Helen.
And I second what Dawn says. I went back to school because I was in a low wage job and tired of not having enough money to buy food, heat, oil, keep the old car on the road so I could go back and forth to work. And I graduated from Hudson in 2016 with a paralegal degree.
scholarship. And I am currently in the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program at the federal level because where I work and what I do, helping people with main care and the marketplace and all that good stuff. So yeah, loan forgiveness, college education, higher education, bringing better businesses or more high-tech businesses back to Maine or here. Yes, we need to do that so we all can survive, so our grandkids can stay here. I mean, come on, Maine is the most beautiful state in the country. Except in winter, after a snowstorm and the sky is that deep blue and the snow is bright white and there aren't no tracks in the road yet. So next steps. There's going to be a meet and greet with the candidates who would be climate heroes. Next Wednesday, I think, is the 3rd of October. 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Universalist Unitarian Church of Waterville, which is at 69 Silver Street. Come here and speak with Representative Janet Mills and candidates for the Maine House and Senate in the area from northern Augusta through the greater Waterville area and up to Unity. Oh, that's a pretty good swap of territory there. And if you're an undecided voter, are you interested in volunteering for a candidate who's willing to do what it takes to protect our children's lives? Come and join us. Yay! It is October 3rd.
For anybody, I have leaflets over here about that, so you feel free to take one on your way out.
Something else going on in October 3rd. Was it with the Mainers or something?
Yes. It is the community dinners, but those are already closed up as far as who can participate in that. They have limited seating.
Okay.
But KVO will be talking about that and announcing something publicly about that.
Yeah, and then I've got to get a plug for my old school. Tomorrow night, there's the nonprofit, the gubernatorial debate, I believe, up at Husson. And then that's starting, I think, at 5:30. I know I can't go because I'm the best until 5. And then I also just want to make a plug for the KVO and the constant need of financial support. We are starting our fall 2018 fundraising giving campaign. Yay! And included in your packet, there is if you want to make a donation, please do, by all means.
I didn't include one on the candidate packets because you can't take money from the candidates themselves. But if you want to make an individual donation from yourself to the KVO, you are more than welcome.
Right, it can't come from your campaign. No.
But it's coming from you personally.
Personally, yes. Is there anything else, ladies?
One thing, and I wanted to thank you all for working within the time constraints of this forum tonight, where we are all extraordinarily impressed with one, the attendance of the candidates, but also the thoughtful answers that you provided for these questions. So what we'd like to be able to do would be to send all of these questions to you for written responses, so that way you have an opportunity to take what you said tonight, and you did really, really well, Christine. You had no plan whatsoever, and she with her little notebook, and allow you to be able to expand a little bit further onto that, because when KVO is built on our members and what it is that they set as our priorities. So the way that these issues all came together to be part of our forum tonight is we had an issues assembly about a month ago, and we surveyed our members, and from that, and there's nothing to that, it was lifted up as to these would be the topics that people were interested in. I would like to be able to provide you an opportunity to give us a deeper answer on, as if you feel that you'd like to do that. I'm also going to be sending out to the folks who responded but were not able to be here tonight and sent their regrets, the same opportunity to be able to write their answers. And while I have been videotaping this entire thing and it will be made public, we will be holding the video until we have the written responses, so that way the whole thing will be put out publicly together for the public. And certainly any pictures, video that we're taking tonight and we're putting onto social media is absolutely free to the public to use and distribute as well.
I'm going to get one more plug on the financial side of this. If you want to keep the KVO going, please contribute, please donate. Can't say that enough. So I think that's it for me. And we'll pass it back.
Well, I want to thank the candidates for being here. Thank all of you for being here, for the people involved with KVO, to thank them, the work that went into this. I was very impressed with the spirit of the discussion this evening. In the time that we live in, it's a bit of a surprise to have such a civil discussion, and I'm very appreciative of that. I don't have anything profound or inspiring to say to except one word, maybe two words. Vote. Go vote.